Hey guys, Jackson here, and in this tutorial what we're going to be making today is the mechanic from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. When Link's in the air and he pulls out his bow, time slows down and he has the ability to look around and shoot several arrows all at once in different directions. I really like that mechanic. That's a lot of fun, and we're going to reproduce that today in Unreal Engine in a very basic form, without all the fancy arrow animations and that. But what we will create, you can skip to the end to have a look at the final product, but a quick description would be game will slow down, the post-processing, the screen will go grey, just like in Breath of the Wild, black and white. You'll switch to a first-person mode with a little reticle, and we'll have the ability to shoot a little projectile straight at that reticle while time is slowed down, and it'll only work in the air. So let's get started. This should be relatively quick, but I always say that, and my tutorials always end up being really long, but who cares. This is the third person template. Is that recording? Yeah. This is the third person template. So to get started, what we might do is we might create his ability to shoot. So if you go to third person BP, blueprints, third person character, crack that open. Go into your event graph, find some empty space. What we're going to do is we're going to give our little character the ability to switch to first person as if he's taking aim. So to do that, if you just grab your follow camera here like this, and we move that up to where our first person position would be, something like that. We'll take these values up here, so 330, 0 and 50, and we can return that to default. And then what we'll do is we'll get our follow camera, hold control to drag, and then if we drag off that, we can say set relative location, and we can set that to 330, 0 and 50 like that. Now what we'll do is to switch to that, we'll say middle mouse button, and we'll hook that up like that. So when we press the middle mouse, we'll switch to first person view like that. So let's give that a test. So we're running around, middle mouse, there we go. We're looking down like that, we can look all around. Beautiful. Now what we might do is we might add the ability to switch back to regular as well. So off of pressed, we'll say flip flop. So first input will go to this location, second input through the flip-flop will go back to 0, 0, 0. So now we should be able to switch back and forwards, just like that. Alright, so let's give that a test. Cool, so that's just the equivalent of like taking out your bow in Breath of the Wild. Now, go back to your content browser. I'm just going to add a new folder here for everything related to this tutorial, and I'm going to call this slow motion mechanic. Crack that open. We're going to add a new user interface widget blueprint in here, and we're going to call this reticle. And basically all this is just going to be is because I don't have a little image to use, I'm just going to say in the search palette we can just say border, I think is the one we want. We just want a border, drag that in the middle somewhere, go to anchors, click the center, and then set the position relative to the center to 0 and 0 like that, and then set the alignment to 0.5 and 0.5 so that the middle of that border is right in the center of the screen. Now the size, let's just make this, I don't know, like 20 and 20, just so it's a little square like that, just so we can see where we're aiming. If you wanted to make this look more realistic, you could, instead of having a border, you'd put an image. It's exactly the same positioning and size and all of that, but instead of having just a white box, you'd have a actual image of a reticle, like a little crosshair or something. So that should be good. Now if we go into our third person character, and off of set relative location on the top, this is changing to first person, what we're going to do is we're going to say create widget, and the widget that we're going to create is going to be called the reticle, and we'll promote that to a variable, so we'll save that for reference later, and we'll call this reticle ref, and then off of there we're going to say add to viewport, so that it's actually added to the screen. Boom, just like that. And then down here, when we switch back to third person, grab your reticle reference, and we're going to say is valid, and then off of is valid, if it is valid, then we're going to say remove from parent, just like that. The reason that we do the is valid check is because if you switch to third person and this thing doesn't actually exist, it'll cause an error. So it's just a little extra layer of safety. So now if we go play, first person, we've got our little dot on the screen. Third person, it disappears. So that's going to be where we're aiming. Now let's add the ability to actually shoot. So we're going to add a new variable down here, and this is going to be called aiming. And if you drag off and hold Alt, we'll set this over here to true when you're in first person, and set it down here to false when you're in third person, just like that. Now this is all set up, that's all well and good. So now what we'll do is we'll add a right mouse button. So whenever you press right mouse, what we're going to do is we're going to have a branch. This is going to be our ability to shoot. Put is aiming down there. If we are aiming, what we'll do is we'll do a line trace. We could spawn a projectile, but just to keep this tutorial simple, we're just going to use a line trace just to demonstrate. So we'll say line trace by channel. The start position is going to be, I believe we'll just use the follow camera position, since that's what the, yeah, we'll use the follow camera. So we'll say get world's location, and that can be the start like that. So it'll start from the center of the camera, and then for the end we'll get the location of the follow camera, and we'll say add vector down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add to that the forward vector of the follow camera, so the direction that the camera is facing. But this forward vector is only a unit of 1, so if we multiply that by a float, this can be the range of our attack. So we could just set that to like 1000 like that, hook that up into there, and then hook that up into end, so that the end value will be the position of the follow camera plus 1000 units in the forward direction from the camera, and the start is obviously just the position of the camera. Okay, actors to ignore. We can make an array, and we can just ignore ourselves, and we'll put the debug for duration so that we can just see where we're hitting, and that should be all good. So let's see if that actually works. So we'll go play, first person, right click, there, see that? That's us shooting right at the reticle, and it's got a range of 1000, so you can see they're not hitting the wall because they're not long enough. And if we try to shoot in third person, nothing happens. Cool. Just to make that look a bit cooler, let's actually go off of the return value and say branch. So if there's a hit, what we'll do is we'll break the hit. Alright, this is getting a bit cluttered, so let me just move all of this up like that. If there's a hit, we'll break the hit, and we'll find the impact point, and we'll say make transform. And on that transform, we're going to say spawn, hang on. So right click, we'll say spawn emitter at location, so we don't want the transform. And go impact point, hook that up to location, and then hook the branch of true up to spawn emitter at location, and we'll just spawn an explosion. And we'll also say spawn sound at location. Oops, that's spawn sound 2D. I suppose it doesn't really matter if we don't have any attenuation, but we'll go spawn sound at location, and we'll put an explosion sound in there as well. So now we should get the effect of actually blowing shit up. Cool. So that'll explode at the impact point wherever that hits. Now that's going to look really cool when we actually get to the slow motion mechanic. My computer's getting slightly warm. Hopefully the recording still looks alright. Anyway, so that's all good. Now let's actually build the slow motion mechanic. So what we'll do down here, let's just move all of this so I've got a bit more room. Make some space. We'll drag this third person bit down a little bit like that. Now, off the end of this, we're going to have a branch. So this is the switching to first person. So what we might do is we might collapse this here, and we'll just collapse that to a node, and we'll just say switch to FP, just so that it's nice and neat. And then this bit down here, we'll collapse that and we'll say switch to third person TP, just like that. Just so we can keep things neat and just easier to follow. It just makes it easier to see what's going on. Okay, and then what we're going to do, so when we switch to first person, we're going to have a branch, and on that branch we're going to say character movement, and off of character movement we're going to say is falling. Okay, so if we're falling when we switch to first person, then what we're going to do is we're going to activate the slow time mechanic. So the first thing that'll happen is we'll say set global time dilation, and we'll set that to say I don't know, 0.1, like that. And what we'll do is when we switch back, we'll say set global time dilation here back to 1. So let's just check that that works. So we're in first person, it's going nice and slow, and then it returns to normal when we change back. That's cool. Now the only other thing is, oh, and let me just check. Okay, so if you're on the ground, it's not changing to slow because we're not falling. It'll only change to slow when we're falling, and it'll change back after we change out. Okay, so the next thing that we need is when we're in here, we need to check that we're not actually on the ground. So at the moment, if I do this and then change to there, now we're on the ground and it's still slow. We want to change it back to normal once we hit the ground. So to do that, to make time go back to normal when we get to the ground, I'm just going to quickly do some stuff to tidy this up. So I'm going to create 2 new custom events up here. One of them is going to be called slow time, and the other one is going to be called normal time. And we're going to put everything related to slowing the time down and making the time normal up here, just because it'll be easier to manage and things will just get less cluttered. So for slow time, set time dilation for 0.1, and for normal time we'll set it to 1, and this is where we'll do all the post-processing and stuff later as well. So we press the middle mouse button, we switch to first person, we check if we're falling. If we are falling, we're gonna slow time. And down here, if we switch back to third person, regardless of whether we're falling or not, we want time to be normal. So we'll go normal time. So now what we need to do is we need to invent a check off of this to make sure that we'll switch back to normal time when we stop falling. So what that check is going to look like is it's going to have a delay, and the delay is going to be world delta seconds, which is the time between every frame, I believe. So the check is going to run every this amount of time to check if we're on the ground. So the first check is just going to be this one over here. So we can delete that. So are we on the ground? And actually before that, the other check that we need to have is, are we still aiming? because if we're not aiming, then we can stop running the check. So are we aiming? Yes. Carry on. If we're not aiming, then what we're going to do is we're going to return time to normal. So we'll say normal time down here, and if you double click that and add a reroute node, we can drag that over here, and is falling. If we're not falling, then double click and add a reroute node here as well, and then hook that up into there just like that. So if we're aiming and we are falling, then we're going to loop this back up to here, just add a reroute node up here, and then hook that back into the delay just like that. And then just to neaten it up, something like that. So this looks like a big bloody bunch of tangled spaghetti, but basically what's going on is we're going to run a check. Are we aiming? Yes. Are we falling? Yes. Then we're going to go back and we're going to wait that amount of time, and then we're going to check again. Now if at any point we stop aiming, we're going to go back to normal time. If at any point we stop falling, we're also going to go back to normal time, and returning to normal time stops this check because it won't loop back like that. So if we activate slow time, then what we're going to do is we're going to start running this check just like that. So I guess we could even collapse this like this, and we could just say check if should be slow time, and that's just going to sit on the end like that, and that's going to reference these events. So we might just put this down here like this. I'm not very good at arranging these blueprints. I bloody get OCD as hell. Okay, so let's test if that works. Actually, before we test if it works, something that'll make it more obvious. If we go add component, we can go post process like this. This is how we get the black and white. Down in here, where would it be? Global, saturation, give that a tick. And what if we change that to 0? See that? The color of the camera just disappeared. So that's black and white now. Something that we can also do is, I believe it's, I might just search for it because I'm not sure where it is. If you type in vignette, that's how you spell it. It's a bit of a funny word. Tick that, crank this up to like, I don't know, 0.8 or something. And now let's jump in the game and see how that looks. So this is how it's going to look when you're in slow time. Obviously we don't want it to look like that now. We only want it to look like that when we're in slow motion. So if we go back into here, this is why we created these two events. Get your post process, drag that into here, and we can say set enabled. Yeah, set enabled. So when we slow time, set enabled to true, and then when we go back to normal time, set enabled to false, and make sure that these are both hooked up to post process just like that. And the default, we want post process to start not enabled, because we're going to start in third person. So if you scroll down and find enabled, set that to false. And if you go to your viewport, you should have your colors back. So now if we go into our game and we play, go first person on the ground, nothing changes, that's cool. We can still do our little shooting thing. If we jump in the air, check that out. We're in slow motion, we're falling nice and slow, and we can shoot as many times as we want. And see that automatically turned us back to normal when we're on the ground. So what if I, yep, check that out, that's working like a dream. And you can shoot as many times as you want, just like in Breath of the Wild. Cool, man. I think that's basically it. That's the entire tutorial. Is there anything else that I want to do on the end of this? You could add some sounds in. So what you could do is for slow time, and you could say spawn sound 2D, because it'll be a UI sound, and you could have a slow motion sound in here, like a pitch shifting down sort of sound. I don't think there's much in the starter content. Just for demonstration, what we could do is say we had an explosion, and let's set the pitch multiplier to 0.1 so it doesn't sound much like an explosion. And then for the other one, when we change back to normal time, we'll use an explosion, but we'll set the pitch multiplier to, I don't know, let's say 2 or 3 or 5. Let's say 5. Just to demonstrate the how it would sound if you had a good sound in there. So it'd be like a big whoo. Whoop. Just kind of makes it more immersive, you know. But that's it. That's the end of the tutorial, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully this all made sense. If you have any requests for me, leave them in the comments. If this was helpful, leave me a comment as well. If you end up using this in a game, send it to me so I can have a look, because that'd be cool. I think that's all I have to say. That's it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.